Welcome to Booked All Night, the podcast for book lovers and writers who are looking for insightful discussions on the latest releases. I'm your host, Jessica Mary, and I'm joined weekly by either Leigh or Magdalyn Ann as we geek out about books and the craft of writing. Over the next few episodes, we're discussing Death at Morning House, a new standalone YA from best-selling author MAUREEN Johnson. Death at Morning House is expected to publish August 6th. So, my little Libronauts, grab your notebooks, settle in, and let's launch on this literary adventure together. So, I'm very excited to go through this. I love MAUREEN Johnson's work. We've actually interviewed her before on the podcast. We've had a bunch of her books for review on the blog. It's always a pleasure having her on, and I'm excited to be talking her work, and also excited to talk about it with you, Katie.
Hi. Yes, I'm very excited. This is my first book from MAUREEN Johnson, so yes.
In that case, how did you like it? Because I know that you don't normally read young adult.
I mean, I have been getting into young adult more and more, but I'm very selective about mine.
Mm-hmm.
But I did enjoy this. I would say, like, I had high hopes for it in the beginning, and it didn't really exceed my expectations, but it just, I vibed with it a bit.
I definitely really enjoyed the voice that she used for Marlowe. Like, all right, so the opening scene for those reading along with us is that Marlowe really likes this girl, Akila, that she works with, and she spends all summer working up the courage to ask her out on a date. And then they go on a date, they go back to this house that Marlowe is supposed to be watching, and Marlowe lights a candle and accidentally sets the house on fire, which is the world's worst first date.
There's probably worse dates out there.
There probably are. Like, they could have, stayed in the house and died. That would have been a terrible first date. But as first dates go, oops, I set the house on fire is pretty high up on the list, I think.
I agree, but it's definitely a way to set the relationship ablaze.
But I also felt like it was so awkward and so cringe and so awful that I immediately felt horrible for Marlowe. So I immediately got connected to this character within, the first chapter.
Yeah,
right?
But for me, the fact that Marlowe went through such extents to find the perfect candle for the date, just that really made me connect with Marlowe. I'm like, I like her because she crushes so hard.
Yes, and I loved that it was a crush and it felt like a crush,
Yes.
One of the other books that I'm currently reading for review, it opens and the character is like a stalker of his best friend. And I'm like, ooh, I don't like starting there.
Right.
That's a thing to build up to. And I really did feel like we got to see the whole crush happen. I mean, very condensed, as most crushes are. But, Marlowe sits there, she's like, oh, she came in, and we were making these hot bottoms, which is a joke throughout the whole book. And she just is so incredibly awkward. And the more she realizes she likes Akila, the more awkward she gets. And it just felt so authentic.
And you mentioned that the relationship felt, or the crush felt so condensed because in a book you only have, so many pages to kind of set that up. But I also feel like the way that she described how she knew she had a crush on Akila, how they worked together and she was working up her nerves, it just felt like you knew this girl was crushing on her for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
And you felt that length of time, even though it's so condensed into, a few pages, like a chapter or whatever.
Yeah.
But I really did like that. But I will say that Marlowe, for me, at least later in the book, kind of got on my nerves with certain things.
Ooh, are they within the first 10 chapters that we are talking about in this episode? Or do we have to wait?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
So she spends this time focusing, especially in the first 10 chapters, focusing so much on Akila. And just focuses on the relationship, and I have a crush, and I have a crush, and I have a crush, and Aquila. But then when she gets to where she winds up within the first 10 chapters, it's, oh, and then I met this girl, and she was cute, and I met this girl, and she was cute, and I kind of got a crush, and then I met this person, and I got a crush, and I was like, girl, let's calm down.
Okay, so that made me connect to Marlo more because, as producer Rob can attest to, I was very boy crazy in high school, and like every other week, I liked a new guy. And so for Marlo to come up and be like, wow, she's cute, I like her now, and then a new shiny thing walks past, and she's like, ooh, she's cute, I like her now. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm 14 again, even though Marlo's 18, I think, 17 or
And
18.
it's interesting you say that, because I'm the same way. Because at first it really got to me, because I'm very much older than a teenager now,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, oh my gosh, she needs to calm down. Like, why are we crushing on like 14 different people at this point? But I was thinking to myself, I'm like, hey, you were the same way. Like, you just dated so many people, and like you would meet someone and like 2 days later be like obsessed with them. So I had to tell myself, like, you were the same way. You were the same way. And I was, I had to agree with myself. I'm like, yeah, but now that I'm older, this is annoying. I guess I was just annoying, and I accept that.
I didn't even date around. I just liked new guys, and I got real obsessive real fast. Like, I enjoyed that she didn't reach obsession for each of these people, but she did,
Right.
like them. And so then, all right. So moving on, we have Riki, who we meet after Marlo is banished, kind of.
She banishes herself.
She
really.
does. She does. She's like, I can't be here. Everybody knows I set a house on fire. And to be fair, if I ever set a house on fire and the entire town knew and I couldn't go anywhere without anybody looking at me like, hey, there's the girl that set her house on fire, I would want to go elsewhere for the summer as well. Like, I don't think anybody can really front her. I also thought, like, on a writing side, what an interesting way to get your character where she needs to go. Like, oh, I have her. I don't really picture being part of this town. How can I get her there? You know what? She sets a house on fire, and then she has to go get this summer job.
Her teacher kind of like pushes her into it. She's like, hey, I know someone who's running this job on this island, and I think it would be perfect for you.
Yeah,
and
given that you set my house on fire.
I don't think it was hers. It was
another
couple.
Yeah, she was watching the other professorial couple house, and that's the house that she set on fire. And I believe it is them that it's the woman of that couple that says, I have a friend who was doing this project.
I must have not made that connection. I'm going to be honest, because I thought it was like her dad's friends who were married, and that I thought her professor knew the university professor that was running it, and that her professor and her were like and Marlo were neighbors, and that's why she was just like, hey, I see that you're kind of depressed, and I know this university professor running this job, and so why don't I just I think you're a perfect fit.
I think your depressed ass is a perfect fit. Also, go away, you light houses on fire.
And I really enjoy how like Marlo is just like, I think at one point is just like, how does she think I'm qualified for this job? Like, what makes me qualified for this? What made her think of me for this job? And I'm just like, yeah. Like, I mean, other than she knew you were depressed and needed to get away, like, it's just like a teenage summer job. Like, anyone's kind of qualified for that.
Yeah. Like, I also love that, getting sent there, it was very slice of life once she got to Morning House, that none of the tasks or jobs she had to do were very specific, and it was all very teenage summer job.
Yeah.
Like it was not out of the ordinary. It wasn't above and beyond. It wasn't like, oh, and then I got there and I had to read 1,500 books about Morning House. It was just like, I got there, they gave me the tour, they told me the script for the tour, and then I started doing tours.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah.
But
and I think she dabbled in a couple other things too throughout the book, so she knew like not like like lifeguarding or anything like that, but
Yeah.
she knew who to go to and when,
Yes.
at least.
Eventually.
Yeah.
There is all right, so there are the friends, and the friends were really weird, and it got kind of like weird for me later on because I don't feel like the core cast of suspects got enough screen time.
Yes.
April does in the beginning,
Yes.
and she's like very friendly, she's very uppity, and then we kind of meet Tom, we kind of meet Van, we kind of meet, what was her name, Liani, and they're all very tertiary. They never kind of come forward and have their own spotlight where we get to suspect them of things or really get to know them very well. So it's like, all right, Van is the pothead. I don't even remember what Tom does.
Oh, he's the
April,
person. Tom is the one that his daddy owns the boat company and is like
right,
the rich person, and just his dad like kind of rules the area.
right. Tom's the rich kid. Liani is the lifeguard. April is like very,
Along for the ride.
yeah, like she's. I don't want to say ditzy, but when I was reading her, I read her in a Valley Girl sort of voice that I could.
Okay.
Yeah, like I could absolutely hear the, oh my god, so like you're new here, right? And that's how she came off to me, was not necessarily fake or disingenuine, but just very extroverted.
See, for her, I felt she was more of like the nerdy goody two shoes who was just trying to fit in with the rest of the group and was friends with the rest of the group because they grew up together.
Hmm.
And that's how I read her,
Hmm.
as like well, I'm kind of in charge here. Like I know everything, and I don't want to break the rules, and these are all my besties.
These are
And
my friends.
and even though like, they all date each other and no one dates me, like we're still friends.
Yeah, so she does have a couple snide comments about how everybody interdates and screws each other. And I think she's the one that kind of drops that about Chris, which is the friend that dies before the story starts.
Yes, because he was the one who got around. Well, I won't say what I want to say because that's revealed later, very
Yes.
much later in the book. Another thing is that like almost every single person in this core group of Marlowe and the teens that grew up in this area and grew up together, everyone, I think, except for like maybe Tom and Liani, is that her name?
Yeah, I believe
Liani,
it was Liani, yeah.
is in the LGBT community.
Hmm.
Like they're either gay or bi or like, and I was just like, wow. I was like, this is a very queer set of characters.
I enjoyed that it was a queer set of characters,
Hmm.
but not in the sense that, like, nobody came up and they were like, hello, my name is Liani and I'm sort of queer. Like,
Mm.
it was just a thing that happened into conversation rather than being like a giant sign or
Yes.
like this neon flashing kind of thing about
Yeah.
who was gay and who was bi and who was like,
Yeah. It was very like 2024 where people are just like dropping in conversation like, oh yeah, I dated that girl, and hey, I dated that guy too. Oh,
right.
you didn't know that about me? Well, now you do.
Yes, and I loved that it felt normalized and not
Hmm.
in this preachy sort of way. Like I've definitely read some books where, in an effort for these authors to get diverse things into their pages, that these characters come up and they're like, hello, my name is Adam and I am black. And I'm like, we'd be able to see that. Like, you don't need to describe a character that way. And the same thing with sexuality. Like, most of the people I know who are queer, their sexuality is essentially freckles. Like, you can tell that they are. They don't have to come up
Right.
to you and be like, this is what I am, and so I have 10,000 pins so that you know what I am. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the lack of theater around it, I guess is what I'm looking for to phrase that. That it wasn't blown up almost out of proportion just to be like, hey, I have gay characters.
Right. And I think that's kind of like a huge difference, at least in books nowadays, between adult and young adult.
Hmm.
Is that, and again, I haven't read every book in the world or every book in each genre, but I feel like adult books are more like plot twist, he's gay, oh no. Whereas now with like young adult books, it's just like it's not a huge thing. Like
Hmm.
if they're gay or bi or non-binary, or it's just kind of like it kind of flows in,
Yes.
and it's accepted and it's normalized, and I liked that. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's just very nice to have that, because that's all queer people want, is just LGBT. Really, that's all they want, is just to be accepted and to be able to be who they are. And I like that these books are doing that.
Yes. I 100% agree. So then there's my other thing with that, my last part on this particular conversation is
Mhm.
that I enjoyed how that was so seamless to tell me about these characters because
Yes.
it didn't become its own plot line, like you were saying, like the
Yes.
adult books that are like a surprise he's gay. Like it was just like he's gay. We're moving on because somebody's about to die here. Like we got
Right.
to we got to focus on the plot, and the sexuality of these characters was just part of their characterization as it should be instead of
Right. And it's
the
also,
plot.
but it also is like the plot, because we know in the beginning,
Well,
because that Chris is dead, right?
yeah.
And so like that's established even before the story starts. And
Okay. So Chris's sexuality is part of the plot because he is
yes, because he's like had these relationships with the the boys and the girls of the
quote
friend
unquote.
group, with the boys and the girls of this friend group, and other people as well. And now they're trying to figure out, like, uh-oh, what happened? Like,
Yeah.
is it's a mystery, and oh, like, was he murdered, and who could have done it? Well,
Yeah.
anyone could have done it, because they all had a reason to.
Right? And so there's also that weird kind of dancing around that they do in the beginning where they're like, yeah, and our friend Chris, he's hmm. And I like that because you could still see, the mourning that these characters are
Mhm.
going through.
Definitely.
But it wasn't like for me it wasn't a big reveal that Chris was dead. The reveal part of that was Riki just coming in and be like, by the way, you're replacing a dead guy, and nobody wanted to tell you. I'm gonna go eat ice cream in my room.
And then
Like,
Marlo's like, I'm in love with her.
yeah, that's true. Marlo crushed really hard on Riki after that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
she also still had her crush on Aquila. Like there's
Yeah.
there's so many scenes where she's got her phone out and she's like, I want to text. No, I shouldn't. And I
And
like that story also got an ending. I obviously can't talk
mhm.
about it here because we're only going up to chapter 10. That crush that she had on Aquila and that those feelings that she had that didn't go away. So as obnoxious as it was for you that she was like, ooh, Riki, yeah. She was still digging on
Oh,
Aquila
April
too.
too. April
Oh, and
too. Wink,
April
wink.
and Liani.
Liani's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that wasn't not something that fully bothered me, because a lot of books do this. But that plot line between her and Aquila, I can't pronounce names right, because I read them. I don't hear them, I read them. Um
Could be worse. You could listen to them from the Kindle text to speech reader, and then you
oh,
don't know how to pronounce anything.
no thank you. um
Aquila.
but that whole plot line could have been resolved so quickly if Marlo just texted her. And the whole time she's on this island, she's like, I really want to text her, but I can't because she hates me. But does she? I don't know. And I'm just like,
But
you're a
right,
teenager. Just text her.
right.
Just say, hey, what's up? How are you? And you can kind of get a feeling just from the way they answer that. But I must say, a lot of books do that. They have this thing where, like, that could have been resolved so quickly if people just talk to each other.
Yes, absolutely. But the other thing also is that when Marlo leaves, she's convinced that Aquila has ended their relationship.
Right.
Uh,
But then there's also, like, her questioning if she really did.
yeah, because
I think
Marlo
she
doesn't ask
did.
questions.
Right. She just runs away and gets depressed from everything.
She just lights houses on fire and then runs away. It's important
Yeah.
to mention at every possible turn that she lights houses on fire because
Yes.
Marlo also mentions this constantly throughout the text.
Yes.
Like, every single time she starts to get cringy, she's like, "Do they know I set a house on fire?"
Right.
And it's the first thing she wonders if people know it about her.
Well, everyone in my hometown knew, so everyone must know everywhere that I set a house
Everywhere.
on fire.
Exactly. That
And if they didn't know that I set a house on fire, they probably know that I serve hot bottoms.
and I serve hot bottoms from the fiery house. But Marlo had such a great, like, angsty sense of humor, and I think that, like, her voice and her humor is really what got me through those
Yes.
slice of life chapters, because we do see her, greeting the tourists and cleaning stuff
Hmm.
in the like the tree house where they're staying, or the Imaginarium or whatever the hell it was called, and all of these other very mundane things, which was, quite frankly, it was boring. It was like a sagging middle syndrome in the beginning of Act One, and I was like, oh no, because I want to enjoy this book. But there's, like, some of her descriptions were amazing. Like,
Yes.
I think it's her description of Van, where she says he's got the widest mouth I've ever seen outside of a Muppet.
And I think you touched on this point a little bit earlier, but so Marlo definitely stole the show. She's the main character. She's supposed to. But
Yes.
you know how sometimes main characters just fall so flat and you're just like, I can't connect with them. I don't care about them.
Yes.
Marlo just had such a personality and was just main character energy and so different than a lot of teenage main characters that I've read. And and here's where you touched on it. You said that the main cast of characters, the kids who grew up together, Liani, Riki, April, Tom, and I think Chris,
Chris and Van, yeah.
and Van, yeah, they didn't get a whole lot of time in the spotlight. And I
Yeah.
think that's such an issue because I felt they felt flat,
Hmm.
where they were kind of like, even though Van's a pothead and Tom's this rich, uptight person, and April's this either valley girl or nerdy girl, depending on how you read it. Everything else about them just felt so samey, and it just
Ooh.
like they did not. Not that I couldn't tell the difference of them, because Marlo makes such a difference out of everyone when she talks about them.
Yeah.
But like I felt like if we didn't have Marlo, or if uh you took Marlo out of the story or whatever, those 5, 6 people just would have blended in to each other for me.
Yeah. But then that's not the only cast of characters that we have.
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
We also have the Ralstons with the initial murder suicide at the house back in
Hmm.
it's like what, 1910 or something, 1890, 1910. So it is July 1932, and we already know that a child dies and then a teenager dies. We know that Max dies and then Clara dies. They are revealed to us right at the beginning of the story through the newspaper clippings. And the first clipping is like about their exercise habits, which was really weird. But then, as
Yes.
we learn more about them, we just kind of understand that Dr. Ralston is really weird and into eugenics and a bunch of other crazy shit.
And, and just to notate, this is the family that owns the house that the current day teenagers are giving tours of. So this is why it's such a huge deal, because we have Max and Clara dying at their house, and then this becomes like a huge thing for the island, and now they're doing tours in present day, and that's where Marlo comes in.
Yeah, there was a real weird spot. So there's Dr. Henson, which is the only adult on the island in modern day. And when she gives her the brief tour, she brings her over to the patio where Clara jumped. and
Mhm.
explains that the patio is no longer, it's not the original patio because Dr. Ralston had that completely torn up when they all left Morning House. And it's also the top thing that tourists want to see. They want to see where she fell to her death.
As someone who
And
loves true crime, that is 100% fact.
yeah, like I've been through a lot of historical houses, and whenever someone's like, "Ah, yes, someone was murdered in this room," I'm like, "Oh my god, show me where." And it is morbid and awful.
Mhm.
And then that spot comes up a few other times throughout the story, but I can't talk about it in the first 10 chapters.
Yes.
So back to 1932. Uh, I felt like more of the 1932 cast
Yes.
came out than the modern day cast.
I think definitely the girls
Yes.
definitely came out versus the boys who also just felt kind of samey
Hmm.
in a way.
I mean, but ultimately they weren't as important to the story
No.
as the girls were, so I'm kind of okay with them
Right.
just feeling like scenery.
Yes. And I just it was their whole and this is a whole plot point is their whole lives were their whole family was just so weird.
Hmm.
And like you said, Dr. Ralston was into eugenics and he had to eat a certain way and they had to have certain diets and exercises and it was just so creepy. And
Yeah.
I consider myself a smart person but also a very dumb person because it didn't click. Eugenics did not click for me. And then like later in the story I'm like, "Oh, eugenics. Okay. Now you know, like it takes me a bit.
Yeah, for the listeners at home, that would be eugenics, like the Nazis.
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw that and I was like, "Oh,
Ugh.
that's weird." But then he was into eugenics. He was a doctor of eugenics, and he was like very forceful about it on the children, the adopted children.
Yes, I was just gonna say we should notate that the oldest 6 kids
that yeah,
were
that
adopted
they're all adopted, and then Max, who is the one who drowns, is the only biological child.
between him and his new wife, who was a stage actress
Yes,
at one point.
his like Hollywood starlet wife.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and so the 6 adopted kids are already like they're very much like, "Ooh, Max has cooties," like they don't want to be near Max. And then there's
Mhm.
also the issue that because he's the biological kid, he gets away with a lot of, which will have to come up in a different episode.
There's a lot to say about the family dynamics between the older 6 children and Max, especially later in the book.
Hmm.
Like, you're led to believe their feelings on Max and the other siblings is one way in the
Yes.
very beginning of the book, and then, like, the way that Clara thinks about Max, like, I just was so floored at the end of it. I'm like, "Wait, that's how she felt about Max?"
Yeah.
Like, because I was led to believe one thing that about how Clara felt about Max in this book, and it got flipped upside down.
Yeah.
There's so much to say about this family.
I there is, and like we can't say it in the chapter 10
No.
discussion.
I feel like everything I feel about them comes like at the very, very, end of the book.
I
Because there's another character in that family that I just did not care about. And I'm like, oh, why are they even in this? And then at the very end, I'm like, I want more. I want more
right
about that character.
there. So there's the girls are what? It's Clara, Victory, and Unity.
Unity, yeah.
And Max is the brother. Then there's 2 other brothers who don't really come into play.
Oh, so it's the older 5, not the older 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought there was 6 though.
No,
No,
I
I
think you're
thought
right. I
there was
think there's 6, right? Because
The doctor adopted 6 of his children in 1915 while working in England during the war. They welcomed their 7th child, Max, 4 years ago.
they don't
Whenever.
name the billion amount of kids that this man has. But really, in the past, the main players are Clara, Unity, Victory, and Max, who is learning how to is supposed to be learning how to swim and doesn't want to. Which every time he goes near water, the reader is like, oh, he came back up.
Right. Yes. There are definitely some, like, scenes where you're just like, oh, is this it? Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah. And then eventually you learn some more about this great, oh my god, like, I don't know how to talk about this family without giving spoilers.
Yeah. Because everything is just very bland for their life. You know, the older children, especially the Clara and the oldest brother, they just want to get away. They just want to leave the house. You know, every time they're away at boarding school, it's the best, you know, time of their life because they can eat chocolate and smoke cigarettes and all this stuff, and they're so rebellious.
Even the staff sneaks them stuff.
Yeah. And it's just like the whole story is just them lamenting about their life and all that stuff until like well past chapter 10 where everything unfolds and happens, and you're just like kind of the snowballing down this hill with their story.
And I think their story has there was a point where I was like, I want to go back to 1932 because that's where all the hot goss is happening right now.
Yes.
I need to know. I need to know what happens. I need to see things. I need answers. I can't go to sleep yet.
So I believe the oldest one is Philip. I just got to his name.
Yeah, and then there's one of them that comes back to the house later to kind of sell it and bury a treasure or something like that.
Yes, they're very samey and they don't matter.
Yeah. And no, but it's true. Like they are essentially setting, but I think by the time you get around to the things that get revealed about this family, it's important that they are there and we know about them, but I don't think that we need to know them as characters. Like craft-wise, because, you know, I can't read a book without thinking about craft. These boys in the past, like, all the things that get revealed about the Ralstons, like, how best to put this without being like, guess what happens? Here's a spoiler. You know, we find out all these things, but it's really important to know that there are 6 children. And then versus the present where we have this other cast of characters that I really desperately needed to come off the page a little bit more so that I could suspect who was going to do what.
The thing, they do match up because you have the 6 older adopted children who grew up together, right? And then you have the one youngest biological child that kind of off on an island on his own. And that kind of resonates with the, like you said, you have these parallel characters where you have the 6 kids, the 6 teenagers who grew up on this island together and know each other and have been friends since a very young age. And then you have the one person who grew up like, you know, a few miles away in a different town and is isolated and just, you know, swings by and says, hey, you know, and replaces, you know, one of this, I guess, 6th person? Was Chris the 6th person or the 7th?
Now I gotta count again. So there's Chris, Van, April, Liani, Riki, and Marlo becomes... Alright, hold on. It's Chris, 1, Van, 2, Tom, 3, April, Liani, Riki. So yeah, there's 3 girls, 3 boys, and then Chris dies and Marlo comes in.
Right. So it kind of... It doesn't exactly parallel 1932 to present day, but it's kind of the same where you have the 6 core people and then you have the 1 outsider.
Yeah.
Just like you have the 6 adopted children and the 1 biological.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of feels the same where like out of, like you said, out of the Ralston children, you have Clara, Unity, Victory, and Max, and those are the ones that stand off the page. Those are the ones that actually have their own personality and do things and kind of make themselves known to the reader.
Yeah. My thing with the parallel, like obviously, you know, there is this parallel between these 2 storylines, is that in the modern day storyline, each of these other teens, like their story should matter a little bit more. Like Van's a pothead, and that comes up later for reasons I can't talk about going up to chapter 10. Chris's sexual history and promiscuity, you know, that also comes up later.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like these characters and their feelings should have been explored more, and they weren't
Mm-hmm.
in the same depth that the girls were in the past.
Right.
You know, we got at least a whole chapter with Victory and Clara and Unity each
Yes.
to explore what they've felt not only about their brother, but about eugenics.
Yes.
I mean, if we had gotten a little more one-on-one time for some snide Freudian slips from the other characters, I think we would have been able, like, the ending when people are getting suspected and revealed, I think might have
Mm-hmm.
had a different impact than it did, where it was basically just like, it's Old Man Jenkins, you know, like,
Just
it,
pull off a mask.
just pull off the mask. It's
So
retro
simple.
raggy. Retro Rarlo. I can't do it with the Marlowe's hard to do in a Scooby-Doo. Rarlo.
Marlowe. At this point, my rating was still a 3 because I liked Marlowe, but it just felt kind of, to me. I wanted to know, of course, more about the characters, more about the Ralstons, and that's where I was 1 through 10. I still was like, this could go either way.
Yeah. Say based on 1 through 10, I was definitely at a solid 3. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not disliking it. The second half and the end really pick up, and I think do
And
a
I
lot of redemption for the book.
definitely the ending is where it really because I went back down to a 3 in the middle of it, and then that's the end is where it became a 3.75, especially with that one character where I was just like, I want to know more.
I felt the same way, and I'm excited for next week when I can talk about that.
Yes.
So we are going to put a pin in this discussion. We've rambled on long enough, and we will
All
see
right.
you next week.
See you next week.
That's a wrap for this episode of Booked All Night. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion on Death at Morning House so far. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode or interview, and be sure to leave a 5-star review of the show. If you can't get enough books in your life and your TBR is now reaching astronomical heights, be sure to join our brand new Discord community where you can get exclusive excerpts, meet other book nerds, and have the chance to sit in on our interviews live. Booked All Night is produced by Rob Cook and hosted by me, Jessica Mary. Special thanks to all our amazing listeners and community members. Until next time, my little Libernauts, this is Jessica Mary signing off and reminding you all to stay booked all night.